Hi. Oh, the microphone does work. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Casey Kadams, and I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Climate Alliance. To those who are joining us here in Dubai, and to those who are joining us online, who are bright and early back home, welcome. And I want to extend a big thank you to our partners at America Is All In for hosting us here in your pavilion. Join me in giving them a round of applause, please. So we've got an incredible group of climate leaders with us today, and we've got some really exciting findings to announce. And to kick things off, I want to share a bit more about our Climate Action Coalition and why we're here. So if you will, I'm going to ask you to please direct your attention to the screens behind me.
This year, we've seen it all.
Our environment, our people, and our infrastructure remain at serious risk from climate change, and it's our communities that are on the front lines of this battle.
The climate crisis is here, and this is America's all-hands-on-deck moment. Fortunately, the U.S. Climate Alliance's 25 governors are stepping up and answering the call. From coast to coast, these governors are advancing some of the boldest and most impactful climate actions yet. Working together, our coalition committed to collectively quadruple heat pump installations by 2030. We rolled up our sleeves with the Biden administration to accelerate our transition to a net zero future. We continued to slash harmful climate pollution. And alliance states and territories are now on track to reduce our collective greenhouse gas emissions by 26% below 2005 levels by 2025 and meet our near-term climate goal. But the benefits are much bigger than just emissions reductions. We're also employing more clean energy workers, achieving lower levels of dangerous air pollutants, and building more resilience to the impacts of climate change than the rest of the country. And we grew our economies, showing that climate action and economic growth go hand in hand. The result of all this work is real progress for America.
The tremendous pace of innovation, together with the policies we've adopted because of your leadership, ought to give us significant doses of hope.
We have a long road ahead to combat the climate crisis, but our resolve and our commitment have never been stronger.
We've adopted because of your leadership ought to give us significant doses of hope.
We have a long road ahead to combat the climate crisis, but our resolve and our commitment have never been stronger.
I personally love that video. I hope watching that gave you a dose of hope for the future, as Governor Inslee said. That may not be the overwhelming sentiment in some places here at COP, as the global community gathers to take stock of the Paris Agreement. But what we've learned from our latest analysis is that the Alliance's 25 states and territories, which together represent 55% of the US population and 60% of the US economy, are making real progress. And we're now projected to reduce collective greenhouse gas emissions 26% by 2025 and on track to achieve our near-term climate target. And we've also learned that if our members continue taking action together in close coordination with the federal government, we can reach net zero emissions by 2050. Just 2 years ago, these near and long-term targets looked out of reach. But since then, our governors have continued to enact increasingly bold and impactful state policies alongside the Biden administration's new and historic federal investments. Their actions and these findings are exactly why it's so critical that we have state leaders to have a platform here at COP to tell the story. We've been left on the sidelines at these convenings for years, but things are finally changing. At this COP, there is a global recognition that climate action doesn't happen without subnational leadership. Or, as some of our governors like to say, supranational leadership. That's what I'm sure Governor Inslee would say if he were here right now. And we've, of course, known this for decades, There is no net zero future without states and territories leading the way. And the findings that we're releasing today make that crystal clear. As you'll hear directly from our amazing group of leaders, the benefits aren't just about cutting climate pollution. I think in these walls, it becomes a lot about numbers and emissions reductions, but this action is also transforming our health, our environment, and our economy for the better. This progress is undeniable and it's unstoppable. We know that we have a long road ahead, but I hope that this event leaves you a little bit more optimistic. And for that, we owe a big thank you to our first two speakers. And I'm going to start by introducing someone who needs no introduction at this point. She's a familiar face to most of you because she has led or helped lead the Alliance's delegation at COP for 3 years running now. She is a governor who walks the talk on climate, and we're absolutely thrilled to have her here with us in Dubai. Please join me in welcoming New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham.
Thank you, Casey. Built-in step for the shortest governor in America. And I'm also very pleased to be speaking before the White House climate advisor because he's a powerhouse. And I think what's really valuable about this panel in session, in addition to, again, being very frank and talking about the findings in the annual report, is that while states and territories are doing incredible work, the partnership between the federal government and this alliance in states has been made more dramatic and more powerful by the investments by the federal government and the policies by the federal government. And so in these transitions, which we want to be bolder, faster, quicker, we want to be more meaningful, more effective, but the methane emissions reductions is no small thing. And I really want to make sure that we highlight that New Mexico has seen record drops in methane emissions in a state that produces, let's face it, a lot of oil and gas. And so when you can't disrupt that in every particular meaningful way, this is one where the data is clear. It works. And to have the federal government adopt, in large part, the New Mexico experience means two things. And for all of the activism, thank you, because these two things are powerful. One, that we've got actual data that shows that the reductions in emissions is real and meaningful, and that our surrounding states that don't do that aren't having those same results. When we talk about impacted communities, look no further than the New Mexico experience for minimizing and disrupting that right now. And look at the data for our neighboring state of Texas, which in a recent report is twice as much. We think it's more like 4 times as much, depending upon, well, frankly, when you have these rules, you can have more transparency about what that data is and isn't. And then the second thing, which this video really highlights, is that there is a sentiment around the United States that it's mutually exclusive, protecting people and economic stability and viability. And that, in fact, is not true. The connection is that the more innovation, the more that we do to stop super emitters, the more that we do to create a national framework for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, also means that we have innovation in accountability, responsibility, innovation, technology. And New Mexico, which has long been excluded from manufacturing, because we're a small state with only 2 million people, that's no longer the case. So workers are moving to New Mexico, and so are companies. So powertrain manufacturers for EV vehicles moved to New Mexico. The first onshoring for solar panels, that manufacturing back from China where we don't want it, that's happening in New Mexico. A state that wants to move in a transition that's rapid, fast, real, palpable, and we can demonstrate that we're creating those economic benefits to New Mexico families for the short term and the long term. And then I will end with this. I will tell you how confident we are, particularly with the fact that the federal government the Biden-Harris administration has our back. That means reliable investments into the state to address the climate crisis and to create that innovation and synergy, not just last year and the year before, and thank you very much, the year before that. But we're talking about decades in the making in the future, where these reliable, sustainable investments create the opportunities we all seek for our states and communities, and in fact, lead the world in meaningful reform and change in addressing the climate crisis immediately. I think we can have exponential results moving here from here on out. And I'm really excited about that. And I don't want us to minimize this unique opportunity that the administration is providing the U.S. Climate Alliance. Because it's one thing to be aligned on the policy, but it's another to have those directed investments to make sure that we can sustain our efforts yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I'm incredibly grateful. And I want to end with that one last piece. A meaningful, robust regulatory environment adopted by the federal government is a powerful move for the future. And we are incredibly grateful and incredibly honored to be participating. And maybe my last words. We're not done by any stretch of the imagination. So I want to thank Casey and the U.S. Climate Alliance and all of the governors and mayors and local government leaders on the private sector who have banded together for meaningful, real change that I think leads the world in any number of ways. Thank you for this panel. I know you're going to introduce our Secretary of the Environment, Secretary Kenny, who's no stranger to making monumental strides forward. And again, I thank you very much for all of your leadership.
Thank you so much, Governor Lujan Grisham. So next up is another leader who has been an absolutely incredible partner to the Alliance. And I want to underscore what the governor just said, which is that the Biden-Harris administration is investing in states. They are taking so many steps to empower climate-leading states and helping us do this work. Most recently, he joined us at Climate Week, where we announced a series of new commitments to decarbonize the building sector, including quadrupling heat pump installations by 2030. He is someone who is always excited to supercharge our work, and we're so pleased to have him with us again today. So please join me in welcoming our National Climate Advisor, Ali Zaidi.
Thanks, Casey. Thank you to the Alliance. Thanks so much to all of you. We've seen really, I think, over the last few days, tremendous dialogue about where we stand. And I think the governor said it well. The global stocktake tells us one thing and one thing clearly, that we have a very long to-do list, not only in the work of deploying more clean energy. And you saw the United States announce yesterday a commitment to triple our renewable energy stock by the end of this decade, but also the important work of doing this in a way that reflects all of our values. I am so proud to be part of an administration and so proud to be a part of a team of local and state leaders who are values aligned on this point, that we've got to do this work in a way that lifts up workers. You know, back home in the United States, folks may have seen, not only are we aggressively moving to zero emission vehicles, we just had one of the most powerful demonstrations of the power of organized labor, not only improve wages for the 3 companies where they work, but lift up wages for almost all auto workers all across the United States. That's the kind of transformation we need to see, and that's why the president hasn't just signed on to a declaration for worker empowerment in the United States. He signed a declaration of worker empowerment for the entire world. Last COP, we got together. We talked about loss and damage. We talked about the need to weave environmental justice and the important work of repair into this dialogue, this discourse around bold climate action. And this COP, on the first day, we saw that translate into the establishment of a fund. But there are miles to go on the global transformation on that front, and there are miles for us to travel domestically. But the thing I'll tell you about the leaders you'll hear from on this panel, and Governor Lujan Grisham, what a great example of this in her state. I traveled to northern New Mexico, where the San Juan generating station used to produce a ton of power, but a ton of power from coal plants. That generating station is now the site. They're not just imagining solar panels in the future, it is the literal construction site for a massive solar farm. And the folks who are working there are IBEW workers, and the infrastructure that will ship this power is not only engaging the Navajo Nation, it's not only compensating the Navajo Nation, it will be owned by the Navajo Nation. And that is a profound example of the way we build forward. So from this group, you will hear not only about the progress that's measured in GHG accounting terms, which is important, let's be clear. You will also hear about how they're doing it in a way that lifts up workers, lifts up communities, and does the important work of justice. The other piece, and we've got some folks here who I think wear it on their sleeve, if I may say very literally, is that we are not going to succeed alone by just expanding another source of power. We succeed as we reduce the demand and ultimately the production of fossil fuels. That relates directly to long life infrastructure. It relates to what we consume and ultimately then what is needed to be produced to meet that demand. If you look at the strategies that are being deployed at the state and local level in the United States, Casey talked about the heat pump announcement. Well, guess what heat pumps run on? They run on electricity. And guess what they don't run on? I went to Maine, traveled around the state with Governor Mills, who is another great example of this sort of leadership. She set a goal at the beginning of her administration to deploy, I think it was 150,000 heat pumps by this last year. They blew through that goal. And so now they've doubled down on that objective, looking at almost twice as many heat pumps. And here's the reason why she did it. Yeah, she wants to tackle climate change, but she also recognizes that when you put those heat pumps, which, by the way, if they work in Maine, they work in cold climates. When you put those heat pumps in a home, you improve the indoor air quality, and you reduce the reliance on a volatile fossil fuel that folks in New England will tell you they pay through the nose when the price of that fluctuates up and down. We don't see that same price fluctuation in the electricity market. I was at a conversation earlier where one of the investors talked about how we can produce a product that is just a better product. And so what is so exciting, I think, about the all-in transformation at this moment is these folks are leaders. They're pushing on an incredible transformation at an incredibly important time, at a pace and scale we've never seen before, but they've got the wind at their sails, right? They've got the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, an administration that just set the most aggressive rules on methane, and we're not even close to being done setting important standards and enforcing them, because standards are only as good as the enforcement that follows through. But in addition to all of that, they are advancing deployment of a technology, a set of technologies that's just better. It will help people literally breathe easier. And if we're purposeful and diligent and we do it the right way, it's also the moment to drive forward on the outcomes of worker power, on gender equality and equity. You know, in the last year in the United States, more women were hired into the clean energy workforce than men. And we've got a lot more work to be done, right? Child care, other policies are enablers of that. and then the work of environmental justice, which isn't just a forward-looking consideration, it's also the work of repair. So the to-do list is long, and a big part of it is deploying clean. I think you'll see from this crew that they pull no punches when it comes to the solutions. Sometimes they lead the way in California, enacting some really smart, I think, rules in terms of protecting public health, human health around facilities like schools. So look, this is more than a dosage of hope. I think we've got a lot of reason to have a sense of optimism, just as we must be clear-eyed about the incredible work to be done. But the only answer to this set of circumstances, to this set of facts, is to be all in. So Casey, grateful for your work and the work of all of the governors and mayors, but mostly governors, because that's what we're here to celebrate today. Thanks so much. Thank you, Governor Lujan Grisham, too.
Thank you so much. Ali, before you take off, we're going to do a quick photo, if you don't mind. I'm going to pull up our three panelists, Governor, and we're going to do just a very quick photo, and then we'll move into our panel. Why don't we just be right here in a line? All right, so next up we're going to keep the conversation going with a power-packed panel, and yes, that's a pun that was intended. Please join me in welcoming California Energy Commission Chair David Hochschild, Maryland Environment Secretary Serena McElwain, and New Mexico Environment Secretary Jim Kenney. So picking up from where those remarks just left off, one of the key findings in the Alliance's annual report is that as Alliance states are aggressively combating climate pollution, they're also seeing greater environmental, health, and economic benefits than the rest of the country. And so I'm asking, I think we'll go down the line, each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about some of the benefits that you're seeing for residents, workers, communities in your states. We'll start with Serena.
Okay, I'm happy to talk about the benefits in Maryland. We have what we call the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, other known as RGGI, if you haven't heard of it. And some of the benefits of RGGI, well, they're incredible. So I'll just start with reducing emissions. So we've had RGGI since 15 years, since 2006. And since then, we've reduced emissions from the power sector by 60% since 2006, and that's a lot. And economy-wide, we've reduced emissions by 30% in Maryland. So we are, as I say, rocking and rolling. And the other benefits is when you are reducing carbon and you're reducing emissions, you are improving the air quality. And so we've done that, and we've also so I can let my other panel members speak. The last benefit we've had is monetary benefits. With RGGI, as a state, we have collected, just from revenues, $1 billion. And we use that funding to offset the cost of low-income residents for bill assistance. We've also invested the money in renewable technologies like solar. So we've had so many benefits. I can stay up here for 30 minutes talking about them, but I'm going to stop now.
No, I love that, and I think we'll probably come back to the theme of collaboration in RGGI in a minute, but I love that. We'll turn now to Commission Chair Hochschild.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and great to be here. So let's do just a quick aerial tour through what's happening in clean energy and climate in California. I think the main point is that the future we're building will run principally through electric wires and not through pipes. And so the grid in California today is powered about 60% from clean carbon-free electricity. Alternative energy is the wrong word to use to describe renewables. Fossils alternative on our grid. And next year, we have a very good shot to get to 2/3 of our retail sales coming from clean energy. And at the same time, we're electrifying almost everything, most notably transportation. When Governor Newsom took office a little over 5 years ago, we only had 5% of new vehicle sales electric. Today, we're at 27%. The best-selling car in the state of California is an electric car. Tesla just surpassed Toyota. And we're on track to be the first state in the country to get the majority of our new vehicle sales from electric in the next couple of years. And of course, we want all these vehicles to be charging, have like electric vehicle happy hour, where they're plugged into the grid during the time of day when we have all the surplus solar. So there's a lot of effort to create good time of use rates around that. In addition, we're electrifying the building sector, both through our code, where we're heavily driving towards all electric new construction, and giving away about $1.5 billion in incentives, really targeted at low-income populations to meet our state's electric heat pump goal, which is 6 million heat pumps by 2030. We're also, for the first time, leaning in big on offshore wind. So we set the state goal at 25 gigawatts of offshore wind, and we now, we have a peak load of about 52 gigawatts. So big commitment there, among other things.
That's great, and I feel like we should all, put a penny in the jar every time we talk about heat pumps, which is great, but we should probably take a penny out of the jar every time we talk about heat pumps. Secretary Kenny, what are some of the benefits you're seeing in New Mexico?
So, okay, good, this is on. Casey, it's a good question, and I'm going to start just by saying I've been a regulator a long time, both at the federal level and the state level, and I like being a regulator, but right now I love being a regulator. And the reason I love being a regulator is because, when you have a governor and you have a federal government that is taking bold leadership to bring certainty through law and regulation, and at the same time you have the BIL and IRA out there that creates an economic incentive to go to that regulation and above it, things that happen in New Mexico are amazing, and many other states. And you heard the governor talk about the Maxion deal in New Mexico, $1.8 billion investment to bring all this solar panel manufacturing back to New Mexico, or back to the U.S. We have a huge green hydrogen research facility that's going to open up from Australia. And the frequency and scale of the economic development that's happening around companies who say, we value what you're doing, we see the economic incentives that are there, and we want to race to the top with you, how could you not love being a regulator at the moment? We've knocked down, since the governor's come into office in 2019, we've tackled about 48 million metric tons of carbon reductions. So we have a long way to go. We have 16 million metric tons of carbon we have to bring down. But can we just kind of celebrate when we can say that we've reduced 48 million metric tons by the policies and laws and what we've put in place today? They're not all reduced today, but we're on our way, and we have 16 more million metric tons to go. That was before BIL and IRA gave us the economic incentive to get there. So again, it's a great time to be a regulator, but it's also a great time to look at carbon as equity. And when you see that equity, there's movement in this space in a way that I just haven't seen in 20 plus years of being a regulator. So I love it.
That's incredible. It's really exciting that we're, I think, talking about regulations in a different way, that it is a means to generating more economic activity, more jobs, more growth in each of your states. And so I love that as a mentality, and I love that we're there.
Casey, I'm just going to add that when people, being a regulator also means that you are unequivocal about when people fall below that threshold, that you're there to bring economic development back to the state legislature, meaning you're going to collect fines and penalties and hold people accountable. So you can love being a regulator, but you have to love it from all sides. You can't just love it from the economic development piece. You have to have standards that you actually enforce. And we've collected, assessed $55 million in penalties against the oil and gas industry. They clearly know that we're not joking when we pass rules. They know that.
No, as Ali Zaidi said, regulations are only as important as their enforcement, and and I'm sure that all of your residents are benefiting from the kind of enforcement that you're taking.
Yeah, I'll add that when we're regulating, that pushes innovation too. And so when we drive, a lot of people say, oh, regulators, but regulators, we're pushing industry to respond, and that's why it's so important.
Well, that's a great segue. I feel like Serena has helped me move into our next topic. So let's talk for a minute about innovation. So we know that some of the most innovative and impactful climate actions come from the state level. You know, I think as you heard the governor and Ali Zaidi say, states often are sort of the first movers, and then the federal government adopts what states have done. And so I will also say, I think a lot of that can go under the radar. You guys are doing incredibly exciting stuff happening at the state level that doesn't always get talked about. And so I'm hoping each of you might be able to tell us a little bit about some sort of transformative policy or program or action that you've taken in the last year that you think you want to make sure gets a little bit more attention. And we can start with Serena.
Okay, I'll start with one innovation I call that we've done based on regulations and pushing innovation is we now have, we're transitioning the building sector by issuing the first building, I'll say it's first for Maryland, the Building Energy Performance Standards, which we call BEPS. And with those regulations, we're pushing the building industry to be more innovative. So they have to respond. And we're hoping that by issuing these new regulations or performance standards, they're able to really look at heat pumps and other, you're gonna take $1 from me.
Take a penny out of the jar, yes.
I need that $1. So it's actually, it's really moving the building industry to decarbonize faster. And so I'm proud about that. The second thing is, it's not so big, but it's big to us, and I'll give you credit in California, where I used to be. One of the first things we did, or as an agency with the governor's support, is we advanced the Advanced Clean Cars too. It was stalled under the previous administration when we were there, before I came, and so I pushed it back into gear to get us back on target. And so now we're back on target to having the auto industry meet the goals of having zero emission vehicles, the cells anyway, by 2035 in Maryland. So I'm happy about that. And we've also pushed the advanced clean trucks. So those are the two things I wanted to brag about.
I love that. Well, and again, another great segue, but I don't think California needs sort of any excuse to talk more about their innovation, but I'm hoping maybe California can speak a little bit about some of the innovation that you're doing in your state, which obviously I think has a great role in inspiring other members of the Alliance to in many cases, follow suit.
Well, first, I just want to, say you don't have to be a big state to make a big difference, and I just want to congratulate New Mexico, Maryland, and the other states that are leading, because a lot of what happens is you create models. And I would point out, I think the defining state energy policies of the last decade has been the 100% clean energy standard. Actually, it started in Hawaii, and now it's law in 21 states. President Biden has set that as the national goal. So
somewhere Governor Green is smiling on us right now that we're giving some credit to Hawaii.
He's actually a college classmate of mine. Good man. But look, I would say one of the things we're proudest of is our investment in R&D. We spend about $1.5 billion through my agency every 10 years on R&D. We're funding next generation battery technologies. What's coming in batteries is incredibly exciting. Up to 50% increase in energy density, longevity, safety, and so forth. Higher efficiency windows, LEDs, all that stuff. And I want to address, one bit of mythology that's been propagated by perhaps some of our red state governors over the years, that if you go big on clean energy, that somehow this is going to be devastating to the economy. We've been hearing that loud and clear for the last decade. And I just want to recount what has happened in California as we have aggressively decarbonized, as we've invested in R&D. Okay, we were the 10th largest economy in the world, and then concurrent with this aggressive decarbonization and investment in renewables, we passed Russia, we passed Italy, we passed Brazil, we passed France, we passed the UK to be the 5th largest economy in the world, perched to soon be the 4th largest, and past Germany. And I think it's really important to point out this has been good for our economy, because actually it's a bad bet to bet against innovation. The economy of the future is going to be built on the technologies of the future. And we are very proud to be the birthplace of so many of those. California was home to the very first utility scale wind project in the world, first utility scale solar project, first rooftop solar, first electric vehicle, first energy storage system, and the first energy codes and standards. And that's really built the foundation for what we see today. We get the majority of U.S. clean tech venture capital coming in because we have this critical mass. And so this is not just climate policy, this is industrial strategy, and I would say it's working.
I mean, all of that is really exciting, and I do think that what you're seeing in the Alliance is exactly that, right? That economic growth and climate action do go hand in hand, and so really appreciate you lifting that up. Secretary Kenny, what's innovative in New Mexico these days?
Yeah, what's not innovative in New Mexico these days? I think innovation is so the buzzword, but it's not overutilized in a way that is, taking the meaning out of it. I'm going to talk for a second about water resiliency, just for a little bit of a shift. One of the things that has occurred, and I think this is probably true in most states, I don't think we're unique in this way, is that we have New Mexicans who are serviced by small rural water districts. And that's, again, probably true all over the globe, in fact. But what we see is that they don't often have the financial stability to treat the water and keep it in the pipeline, right? So there's a lot of loss, and ratepayers are paying for that water, so we wanted to tackle that. We partnered with Google, and we're working with them right now, and I hope to be able to come back next year and tell you about the results of what I'm about to say. But we've partnered with Google, and we're going to take the innovation that we use in oil and gas to look for those super emitters, and we're going to apply it to look at those pipelines or those water distribution systems. They can pass over New Mexico and your state every single day, every 24 hours. They look to see where there might be changes in the earth in terms of subsidence or heat differentials, or maybe that cranberry bog that shouldn't be floating in New Mexico. And they can find these leaks. And when they find these leaks, then we can not only fix the leaks and deploy some of that federal dollars I was talking about, BIL and IRA, BIL, Clean Water State Revolving Fund in particular, we can deploy that in a targeted way, put them on smart meters, help them get a little bit ahead of the curve, and keep the water that is so scarce and so precious in New Mexico safe, healthy, and sent to the residents that need it. So that's one innovation that I'm really excited to take out of the oil and gas field and bring it into our water resiliency efforts. Many other innovations are also happening, but let me just highlight, take a step back from what I just told you. I think when we take data, and data is such a terabyte term, right? When we take this ream of data that we can generate in seconds nowadays, and we can democratize that data and make it public and make it transparent, but make it easy to understand, make it useful, then I think we have true transparency. We have true ability to change things in a way that is for the good of what the Climate Alliance and what its members are working towards. And I think that example that I gave you about water resiliency is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to democratizing data and making it available for all, that you don't have to have a degree. Put it this way, I could turn it on and call my brother and say, hey, what does this say? And he would have the same answer as a data scientist would have. I think that's a really exciting moment that we're in.
No, I really appreciate that, and I think it's something that has come up a lot more at this COP than it has in the past, and I imagine it's going to continue to. And I also appreciate you sort of lifting up the importance of the work that states do working with private partners, with industry in your states, because obviously a lot of this work needs to be done in partnership with industry. That was a big part of our heat pump, I'll put a penny in the jar, heat pump commitment is around sending sort of a signal to industry that there's going to be a demonstrated market for heat pumps, giving a signal to manufacturers to go ahead and build those so that we can install them. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. We've talked a little bit already about clean cars, and that's a story that is great because both Maryland and New Mexico have a great story to tell about sort of learning from and leaning on California. We've talked about RGGI, but let's talk a minute about collaboration. Collaboration is one of the things that we're really excited about at the Alliance. We like to sort of support friendly competition between our states. We like for you guys to feel competitive with one another, to be learning from each other, to be inspired by one another. And so I just want to sort of invite you all to share a little bit about what are you inspired by in other states? How are you learning from other states? How are you working with other states? And we'll do a little bit of a different direction. We'll start with Secretary Kenny, and then we'll work our way back down.
Yeah, the collaboration aspect is exciting. Again, so many examples are coming to mind. But whether we're collaborating with the city of Albuquerque to bring clean cars and clean truck standards together, they're their own air agency, so we can't have a donut hole in the middle of New Mexico where those two jurisdictions are approaching clean trucks differently. Or whether we're going in big, as we did to pursue hydrogen hub funding with Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, which while not selected as a hydrogen hub, it hasn't deterred the collaboration. And I really appreciate that states who banded together, and in the West, I have to say something that unites us more, because if even not those other states don't want to talk about climate change, they do want to talk about drought. They do want to talk about the aridification of their lands. They want to talk about the issues about water scarcity, and call it what you will, because we need to solve problems. We need to advance the ball. And clean hydrogen is something that we're still excited about as 4 states, and certainly in New Mexico. So there's a lot of examples of collaboration, and again, Casey, I have to give a nod to the Climate Alliance, because you bring collaboration to states in a way that we may not always be able to handle the influx of information that's coming, but the Climate Alliance allows us to distill information quickly, to sign on to things together, and to collaborate as an organization with you. And that's huge. That's a huge help. So thank you for that.
That warms my heart. It makes me feel so happy to hear things like that. So thanks for that. I know that California obviously has plenty to talk about in terms of collaboration. I think a few announcements have already happened in sort of the collaborative spirit. But Chair Hochschild, tell us a little bit about sort of how collaboration is driving your work in California.
Well, first of all, I second the thanks to the Climate Alliance and all the good work you do to bring us all together. I want to just maybe tell one collaboration story, more of a public-private partnership story that both Serena and I are involved in. So when you unpack how did we get to 27% of new vehicle sales being electric, a big part of the answer for that, we formed a nonprofit about 6 years ago called Veloz, which brought together utilities, all the state agencies in California that touch this issue, all the OEMs making the vehicles, all the companies making the chargers, environmental groups, environmental justice groups, and we together raised $20 million and spent that on a big Electric for All advertising campaign. And got the word out. We put together a website to help people find out, what incentives are available, where to get chargers, and so forth. And it worked. And we would meet 3 times a year. And we've just originally it was all California. Now we've just expanded to include Maryland with Secretary McElwain's leadership and Hawaii, and we'll be expanding further. But that example of like public-private partnership, leaning in and really building trust and relationships. And there's nowhere else where you can go and be in a board with, Uber and Ford and Electrify America and ChargePoint and everybody else. And it fostered just great dialogue and policy solutions. And we're now doing the same thing for heat pumps. So we're going to launch that. I just finished meeting with every major heat pump manufacturer in the world. Trane, Carrier, LG, Daikin, A.O. Smith, everybody. And they all know that this needs to happen too. And I just want to kind of lift up that model, because I think collaboration between the states is fantastic. We need more of that. But also within states, having the public-private partnership on these kind of solutions has been really a great template.
I love that, and I appreciate, again, I'm sure everyone's so tired of this already, but the mention of heat pumps, because I will say what was so important about the heat pump commitment that we announced at Climate Week was sort of a collective commitment across 25 states around quadrupling heat pump installations and setting a target of 20 million, which is a lot bigger. I know that each of you has heat pump targets on your own, but joining together and demonstrating sort of the collective purchasing power of the Alliance is one of the things that makes me happiest about the work that we do.
Make heat pumps sexy again. That's
yes, exactly.
We'll get the hats made.
All right, Secretary McElwain.
Yes, I'm really happy to talk about collaboration. I will give you props first, if you don't mind. U.S. Climate Alliance, you're the heartbeat for collaboration. We have learned so much just being a part of the alliance. We've been able to benchmark. Even speaking of Reggie, which I mentioned earlier, is where we're capping the power plants. But through working with you and all the just bringing us all together, we learned that other states were expanding the Cap and Invest program, like Reggie, to other sectors, like oil and gas, similar to what California is doing, which has already expanded Cap and Invest. I didn't know that. And so it started a conversation, and now we're working with them because of this partnership that we have. But I want to make two other points on collaboration. One is what you said, Veloz. So happy to be a part of that board, and here's why. In Maryland, we are only at 1.5% of vehicles that are electric versus your 27%. When I was in California, we were at 5%. And I left and blinked my eye, and now you're at 27. And so Maryland, we want to benefit from what you've done, your strategy, and I'm happy that you've embraced us, and I'm hoping to get our number up really quickly too. The second point on collaboration. In Maryland, we have the most aggressive goals, which is 60% greenhouse gas emissions by 2031. How are we going to do that? A lot of people are asking. And we also are our goal is to get to net zero by 2045. We couldn't do that alone in terms of coming up with that strategy. So what did we do? We partnered with the University of Maryland. Ask them, help us, give us a strategy, give us a pathway. And, you know, the scientists at the University of Maryland modeled, this is how you can get there. It's those kinds of partnerships that we need to help us meet the goals and advance ourselves forward. So that's all I wanted to say.
I love that. Those are great partnerships, and I promise I didn't pay her ahead of time to give a special shout out to the Climate Alliance, but we're really proud to be able to help support that work. So switching gears one more time, and I'll just sort of invite those of you who want to chime in here. One of the key features of our annual report this year is just the catastrophic impacts from climate change that we've seen this year. There's been unprecedented firestorms, wildfire smoke, extreme heat, drought, severe wind and hail, catastrophic flooding. And the reality is that none of our states and none of our communities have been spared from the impacts of climate change. And so, I think one of the important things about having supranational voices on the global stage is that those of you who are here and those of you who are here, at the COP are often closest to sort of seeing what the impacts of climate change are on the ground. So, sort of want to invite you to share a little bit about what you've seen this past year in terms of impacts.
You said supernatural, and I kind of like that better than subnational. It has a
I
more heft to it.
have to give Governor Inslee credit.
Yeah,
he says it very regularly,
yeah.
so he'd be pleased to see us carrying that tradition forward.
No, just one point I would make real quick on that is that many of the solutions that we need to provide resilience are the same solutions we need to reduce emissions. Okay, so it is good for grid reliability to have a system that is highly distributed. For a long time, the state of California was powered entirely by like 200 power plants. Now we have almost 2 million with all the rooftop solar that's gone. That's good for reliability. We're more resilient because of that. When you think about cooling, I grew up in San Francisco. Nobody in the Bay Area ever needed air conditioning. Well, that's changed the last few years. Actually, it's been getting very hot in August timeframe. So, we got rid of our furnace. We got an electric heat pump, and that also provides cooling. And so this is there's, I think, an elegant alignment with the technologies that provide resilience that also reduce emissions, and we got to, lift up that part of this.
You mind? Okay, just quickly on climate change and the impacts. I was invited to be a part of a panel in Eastern Maryland, and I get to this town, and I thought I was dreaming. The town is literally almost going underwater. Sea level rise, and we're walking just puddles of water everywhere. And I thought, did it rain yesterday or what? Before I got here, it's like, oh no, we should have. No, this town is underwater. It's basically, and it's literally rising up. I could not believe it. It just scared me. So climate change is real, and we have to deal with those kinds of things all the time. We have storm impacts in Maryland, and so we're trying to be more resilient. You know, we're working with counties and cities and making sure that their storm mitigation is a lot stronger and a lot better. Believe it or not, we get resistance when we're pushing regulation like that, but it's important because we know that climate is changing and it's impacting us in so many ways. And the last point I'll make is wildfires, not in Maryland, but we have extreme smoke coming from Canada into Maryland where we couldn't breathe, and we can't get over there without a passport, but their air can get over to Maryland and the United States without a passport. So that's just dealing with, you know, issues globally. Is not just us, just all the states. Air travels, right? So we're dealing with climate change just like everyone else is.
Yeah, I'm just going to take the impacts question because we're not different in any ways you just said. But the impact that I see is that, I'm going to spin it a little bit, so I hope you don't mind some artistic creativity here, Casey, is that I think the impact that maybe we would all agree to is that there's no better time to join the supranational workforce. So, you know, you have industry that can attract and retain talent. You have motivated NGOs that are out there that are attracting and retaining talent. What we see in the public sector space is we need to attract and retain talent. And, you know, if you're considering moving to New Mexico, I'd love to talk to you and hire you and pay you well. And,
Or Maryland.
or New Mexico. And
There's a lot of climate jobs around in
there's a lot of
Alliance
climate
states,
jobs.
I think, to be found.
But it really, the impacts from climate change should be a call to action for, you know, high schoolers to get internships, college students to think about applying, whether that's in the business sector for finance. Come work for us because we do financial work at states. If you're in accounting, come work for us because we need to assess the impacts of climate. If you're an engineer of any kind, a scientist, a business major, a lawyer, there's no wrong door, there's no wrong career to work in climate. And there's no wrong career to come into state or federal, but state government. And again, that's a big, it's an area we need to focus on because these impacts are not going to go away anytime soon, and the work is there. And I have to give a shout out to the Environment Department in New Mexico, the employees that are probably, you know, watching at some awful hour right now, but they do great work, and they're always looking for fun and smart colleagues.
I love that. Let's turn this into a job panel. No, I mean, I think that's a great direction to take us, and hopefully, you know, this is an opportunity where, as folks see the growing impacts of climate change, that it is a source of inspiration for folks to commit themselves to the climate fight. David, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, there was actually one just additional point. I wanted to kind of tie the question we're dealing with now on resilience to an earlier question about regulation, as I do think one of the most potent things we can do is actually a building code. And I want to just highlight, we have had great success with the building code. The Energy Commission in California is responsible for that. We're adding 310 million square feet of cool roof a year for the last decade, almost 3 billion square feet altogether since we put that code into effect. That really reduces, excessive heat. And then we're adding, it's now 730 megawatts annually of rooftop solar through code. So I think, you know, one of the things when you're in a hole, first thing to do is stop digging, and we got to make sure the new stuff that gets built all over the country and all over our states is done right and done green. And that has been a very, very important lever. And also, when you do those codes, you actually, that's economic strategy too. You know, you get the cool roofing industry, the rooftop solar industry, and all the rest, LED lighting and, you know, insulation and so forth is all driven by that. So I just want to lift up that piece of the solution mosaic as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. For me, this was a dose of hope and optimism. I hope those of you in the room and watching online leave this feeling the same way. I so appreciate the passion that these leaders and leaders across the Alliance are bringing to their work. because the reality is we all feel this sense of urgency, and as the impacts get worse, the need and the sort of compulsion to act with the innovation and ambition that you all have talked about today is only going to continue to increase. So I know that we've only scratched the surface. We're going to be having another session tomorrow at the Climate Registry Pavilion, where we're going to be diving into some of the experiences of some of the women leaders across the Alliance. And so I hope you'll join us tomorrow at 4:30 p.m., where we're going to pick it back up. And so if you will, just please join me in giving one more round of applause to this amazing group of state leaders. And to our hosts at America's All In, thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, thanks for joining us. Really nice to have you here. Hey, friend. Of course, thanks for joining us. Oh, just finding you guys.
That's good. That's fantastic. All right, thank you.
Oh, no. Hi, Derek. Hey.
You got my new boss.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. Alexander's a dear old friend, so. Alexander was texting me. Oh my gosh. Make sure you tell me where the events are going to be.
Does that answer it?
She does. We're working with her.
We're hosted by AHA for our building centers. Yeah, and hopefully all the mentions of building applications, building codes, buildings are very sexy. Oh, you were there with that? No. Very good. I also wanted to mention in this room. How long is it? Okay. Well, that is a big
I'm getting called out. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, Kate's out of Georgetown.
Oh, yeah. You look familiar too. I may have seen you here somewhere else.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with states and your colleagues.
I mean, honestly, I was
Great remarks. Thank you.